And this is the good news according to St. Mark, the 7th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Now Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice. A woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin, and she begged Jesus to cast the demon out of her daughter. Jesus said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And then Jesus said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Then Jesus returned from the region of Tyre and went by the way of Sidon toward the Sea of Galilee, in the region of Decapolis. And they brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hands on him. Jesus took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. And then looking up to heaven, Jesus sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And then Jesus ordered them to tell no one. But the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
May God's grace and peace be with you all this day. It is September, Labor Day weekend, unbelievably, at least somehow it feels that way to me. I'm not ready for summer to be over. And so I'm feeling this sense of, I don't know, melancholy, I guess, disappointment. Truth is, I guess I'm always like this at this time of year, even here in California, where we know there's still going to be lots of sunny days and warm weather. I think I have some lingering vestige of growing up in the Midwest. And so the end of summer really, well, I had the feeling that it was pointing off towards the coming of winter. It seemed to last always longer than summer. But still, even here in SLO, there is a difference. September, the coming of the season of autumn, a kind of change in the light. As summer draws to the close, the days become shorter, and soon there will be more of a chill in the air. And then later, that paler light of winter. Autumn, September is that transitional season which moves from the vibrant light of summer, well, to increasing darkness, from life into what can feel like a kind of death. And so it is, of course, in the second year of the COVID pandemic that there's an added dimension to all this in this ending of summer, this year, 2021, where we began the summer, I think so many of us, with a real heightened sense of expectation and excitement, hope that now, with the surging of the Delta variant, seems like it's been grasped, taken away. The ongoing impact of this pandemic on life, all life, including our life together as a community of faith. Well, somehow all of this together, the end of summer and the approach of autumn in this year, it intensifies the feeling of loss and melancholy. So it is in such a time as this that those lyrics to the song, Try to Remember, come to mind. And that's why I asked Joan to sing it, and thank you again. At the close of summer, I find myself, perhaps you do too, longing for that time when life was so tender that no one wept beside the willow. I long for that gentler season and more innocent life that somehow is no longer a life that I know only now by the distance that I've traveled from it. In such a season of change and loss, some fixed point of reference by which to get my bearings. I need something beyond this time to give me hope. I need some way of living in the present, in this time between life and death. And so I may be projecting a bit, but so I think it for all of us in this season. The other truth for all of us is that in order to do this, we somehow need to look beyond ourselves and our own lives of change to that which is unchanging. That is, I need to look to God. In our gospel reading for today, Jesus reaches out with hands of healing in two different situations. As you heard, one is for a woman pleading for her daughter who is possessed of a spirit. Some people bring a deaf man, Jesus, to be healed. Now, there are some interesting parts of these stories, especially something that I have to briefly comment on, at least the part about Jesus's initially harsh response to the woman's request for her daughter. We can talk more at length about this at another time, but I'll note for now that I believe that when Jesus said it's not right to give children's food to the dogs, he was not speaking what was on his heart, but instead exposing the thoughts of what his disciples and perhaps some others were thinking about this foreign woman. But for today, the important thing is that in these two stories of healing, reaches out to these people that might have been considered beyond the pale of God's concern. And then secondly, that what he does in his healing in both cases goes beyond a physical cure. Truth is, that's really always the case with the stories of Jesus healing someone. What Jesus does for the woman and her daughter, what he does for the deaf man when he says, "Be opened," is not just to cure a physical ailment, but to turn them to life, to restore them to the fullness of life, to give them hope and meaning. them back into community. And I believe that's what we all need in this time. We need the healing power of God's love present in Jesus to give us a sense of expectation and hope in the midst of these troubling times. We need a power beyond ourselves to help us live in the present and restore us to a sense of abundant life. And it is why we gather here, to be touched by the good news of God's love, by Jesus' healing hands. And it's why we need each other to live out this good news in our daily lives. That is, to both hear the message of God's love and to hope beyond ourselves, and then to practice it, to live it in our daily lives. There's a line in that September song that also touches home. Without the hurt, the heart is hollow. And maybe we know the truth of that in a especially deep way in these past years. But you know, there's something about September that isn't just about endings or change in a negative way, something hidden in the play of an autumn breeze and the sudden stirring of fallen leaves. Endings, too, are filled with promise. It is the dream that even now we can keep beside our pillow. For if something is ending and is no longer, the promise, God's promise, is that something new is beginning. Faith in God is the way of perceiving the promise of new beginnings in what may appear to be an ending. It is that way of living in the present even in a season of change and loss. Faith is light in the midst of darkness, hope in the midst of grief, the gift of life even in the midst of death. Amen.